Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the lecture. We're delighted that you're here. My name's Michelle Finnemore. I'm the Penny Vinnick Curator of Fashion Arts here at the MFA. And we just opened last night the #Textile exhibition, and we are so delighted to welcome one of the artists represented in the show today. Lauren Bowker of The Unseen is here with us, all the way from London, and we're really happy to have her here. I'll give you just a very brief introduction to Lauren, very impressive, multi-talented lady at a very young age. She studied chemistry at Manchester in England, and then she studied textile design at the Royal College of Art in London, and she has fused these two skills and talents in this really amazing way. So she calls herself a material alchemist, and really what she does is quite magical. And if you saw her pieces in the exhibition, they are the two color-changing capes that look like feathers, but they're actually leather capes that are imbued with this color-changing dye, the special color-changing dye that she herself has developed. And so what Lauren will explain to you in fuller detail is this idea that the unseen is trying to capture the phenomena that kind of surround us and are in our environment, in our bodies, even under the Earth's crust, in the air, trying to capture those phenomena and translate them into a garment that expresses what's going on maybe in your brain. And it's really quite amazing what she's doing and the number of different projects that she's worked on. So I think I will leave it to her to talk more about her work. But I wanted to thank, first of all of you for coming, but also the Anne and John Clarkeson Fund for Lectures and Programs, which funded this. So without further ado, welcome Lauren.
Cool. Hey everyone, thanks Michelle for introducing me. And yes, like we said, it was the opening last night, so if I faint, then everybody feel free to pick me up. No, I'm joking. So I founded The Unseen just 2 years ago, and we're called The Unseen because we predominantly like to visualize different unseen stuff, whether it's in the body, on the body, or off the body. We like to create materials, and we call ourselves a material exploration house that can sense this sort of unseen matter or this invisible stuff, whether it's data or whether it's things spirituality or ghosts or UFOs, anything that we don't understand as humans. We want to use science combined with design. Sorry? Oh, it's not working? Is this better? Yeah? So we like to use science and design to visualize this stuff going on that the human can't perceive.
The unseen exists to explore the unseen, a house fusing matter into material. We investigate the unseen world around us by stepping beyond sensory experience and taking knowledge out of research and into material. We fuse scientific study with creativity to enhance matter at the hidden level. We offer this discovery to you through our art and through performance. The world is full of unseen magic. We invite you to see the unseen.
So I always like to play that video first, mostly because it gives me a little break at the beginning, but then also because by introducing the brand in a sort of artistic-led way, we hope that none of you are thinking about technology or science, and that's very much the crux of The Unseen, is that, yes, we're a very scientific company, and we value our sort of cause very much in data and proving academically that our new developments and our new technologies are as innovative as they are beautiful, but we like to release those in a very performance-led way. We don't believe that you should just do the science conferences. And like I said, we're pretty young, so I'm going to take you through a little bit of a history as to how the company came about and some of the work we've been working on up to date to the Air Collection, which is currently in the exhibition next door. So I founded it in the basement of a vault in Somerset House in London, which is a listed building which was actually Henry VIII's son's castle many years ago. It's also the home of the British Fashion Council in England. And when I decided I was going to create a brand that could sit in between science and design predominantly for application, I thought the best place to do that would be right underneath the Fashion Council's nose, and to try and do something a little bit, undermine them, I guess, and to believe in that wearable technology could be something else other than gimmick. So that's where it began, and this was our studio sort of 2 years ago. It all started in my undergrad when I was studying chemistry, when I created this compound that absorbs air pollution. So it changes colour from yellow to black to let you know how much air pollution you've absorbed each day. And then reverses itself when you're in a less dense atmosphere. And originally I always wanted this to go into textiles, because when I was creating it from a science-led angle, I really saw that there was a much more poignant and a much more real response to data if you physically showed somebody that that was the amount of pollution that was around them, rather than giving them facts and figures and data and throwing the book at them. If you literally showed them in colour change exactly what was happening in real time, you got a really big, profound effect, and you can imagine not many people really want to walk around seeing the pollution on their own garments. But this was a really important point for me as a designer and as a scientist, because although I really wanted that to go into clothing and to go into a real application that was in someone's hands, it didn't. It went everywhere but that. It sort of went into concrete, it went into car converters, it went into lots of science stuff, and I spent my sort of early 20s going around science conventions with sort of middle-aged, if not slightly elderly men, which I decided wasn't the life for me. So I gave that up and decided I would go back to the Royal College of Art to see if I could marry up this aesthetic and see if there really was a sort of deeper meaning to what the science that I was creating could help someone's life, basically. And then I graduated the RCA after 2 years with this piece, which was perhaps the complete other end of the spectrum, maybe a little bit too artistic. But in essence, it was a sculpture piece which I hoped would hack the fashion industry almost. But it really was that marriage of both concept, story, and technology. So this piece, I was writing my dissertation on the time on what is a technology, and starting to think about things, why do wearable technologies have to be perceived as plastic or as something like quite electronic? Why can't we look at things like material? I'm sure sort of, when someone first put the light bulb on many years ago, everyone thought it was magic. And I really thought that in today's wearable technology and textile technology world, that sort of magic and that aesthetic and that tactility had been lost. And I wanted to sort of bring that back and draw light onto it. So this piece was, philosophically, it was all around Egyptian mythology and using the feather as a sort of conceptual object, which Egyptians used to, if you died, you would weigh your heart against a feather, and if it was heavier, you went to hell, and if it was lighter, which is kind of a bit mean, but that was what they believed. So I thought, what if you could tell the story of reinvention through a feather from a sort of phoenix point of view. But then at the same time, if I could create a compound that would sit within a feather and it still feel like a feather, it was technically a good piece of science. So I created a compound at this point that didn't just change from yellow to black in air pollution. It started to track things like heat and UV and moisture and friction, many different sort of stuff, should we say, unseen matter in the environment. But at this point, the technology wasn't all within one at the time. It was sort of, if you wanted a blue to monitor moisture, if you wanted a red to monitor heat, or a yellow to monitor pollution, you had to build it in single units. So this piece changed its colour dependent on the fluctuations in the environment, but it's only on one sort of feather or one digit, if you as such. Which I can show you with these feathers. Just as the wind passes across them, you'll get a slight purple to white shift. So this is where the research was at upon graduating of the RCAs. That was sort of 5 years ago? I can't remember. I think it was 5. And at this point, it was when I decided I'd left the RCA, and I'm sure if anybody has done education here, when you leave university, you're broke, so you have to go into do many jobs. So I started working at the Royal Academy of Engineering in the Material Archive, and then at the same time I was working at Airbus, designing the future plane, so the 2050 plane, and then I was also working for will.i.am, doing some crazy stuff for Intel, which was horrific, but met some very interesting people. And then all of a sudden everyone was wanting, I saw this sort of need for a designer that could sit in between both of these spaces but articulate it, and I kind of started to get really annoyed, sorry, nearly swore, really angry that all these people were doing research and they were creating the most incredible materials, but it wasn't going into anyone's hands, and it was all just staying in research, and then somebody else would come along and be the head of department and it'd get forgotten about. So I was kind of at this point in my career where I really wanted to create something of impact, but I didn't have the credibility to do, or the finance to do so, until this picture happened, which was Kate Moss, Tim Walker, and Katie Grand, which are three of fashion's sort of biggest hierarchies at the time, and still are. And it was really a bizarre time because this was a sculpture I made upon graduating, and they shot the piece without me knowing. It just sort of landed literally in my mailbox one day. And all of a sudden, this whole world of fashion was opened up to me in a different way. So whereas before I'd been trying to knock on the British Fashion Council's doors saying, look, this is amazing, for some reason, once I had this image, it was a lot easier to get people to listen to me, which I thought was great, because if fashion is a very, very great trend predictor, and it creates trends. And if you can convince the fashion industry that your material or your science or your application is a good one and that it's beautiful enough to go into the fashion world, then you can really start to influence other sectors. So at this point, I decided to kill my consultancy company and in good old-fashioned unseen way threw a funeral. And invited all of my clients together, and we took Shoreditch Box Park. So Shoreditch is a East London trendy sort of hip area. There's always weird stuff going on there. But we took over a big shipping container and turned it into a church for the day. And then we got Hendrix Gin to sponsor it, and then we had a band called Razorlight doing all the hymns, and we sort of brought together all of my clients, like will.i.am, literally Airbus, all these amazing scientists and these amazing creative people together. And I basically said, I'm not going to work for you again, but there's somebody in this world that can. Where it bought me some time to sort of think about how I could go about setting up this company. And at that point, I'd committed my life, myself, into wearing black, which I thought would last like 2 weeks or something, 2 months. But it's 2 years later and I'm still wearing black every day, which has become quite a poignant part to the company. So there's method behind the madness, in a sense. Like there's a Victorian mourning tradition. So many years ago in the Victorian age, if something you loved was passed away, you would traditionally wear black, and then you would move out of your phases into grey, into purple, into yellow at appropriate times. And I thought that this was a really cool way of assigning myself into saying that what I believed in and what I stood for in terms of my company ethics, I was really going to project that in the way that I lived my life and how I sort of went about my daily activities in London. And it works pretty well because people then get to recognise you as the sort of woman that wears black and a hat all the time. So that works great in London. But where that's come back in now into the company is we have a code of uniform, a bit like Star Trek, where the earlier you sort of have come into the company, you go through these colour codes. And I very much believe that alchemy or science is and should be magic, and I think we should really combine both art and science together to create something beautiful. And yeah, the whole concept around that, everybody who works for me, whether they're a coder or whether they're a chemist or whether they're a philosophist, they all have to have this core belief in that they're creating something beautiful but also technically amazing. So at this point, I won an award with the government over in England to create an innovation and do basically exactly what I was saying, an innovation within fashion that hadn't been seen before. And it's a really amazing time to be in this industry because at that point, it was the first ever award I'd seen, sort of bursary award that allowed you to be a scientist and be a designer. And being here at something like Textile is a sort of gradation, I think, sort of 2 years later, that the world is now more accepting only 2 years later of materials and seeing them as a science and also as a design than it was just 2 years ago. So it's a really nice sort of full circle to come around. Having won that award, I then set the Unseen up, and we didn't want to launch the technology we were creating at that time in any sort of normal way. So we decided to have an in-bulk fire festival underneath Somerset House, and thought the best thing to do would be to get a stunt model, put her in one of our garments and set her on fire. And that was how we would portray or launch our technology to our unknowing audience, which scared a lot of people, but it was great. And again, it was about this experience. So yes, we were launching a compound that we created, but at the same time, we were bringing people into our world and never speaking about it as a technology, always just showing people something they'd not seen before. And so we had, we worked with Hendrix and we designed cocktails, and we had this whole sort of experience around the evening leading up to the launch of this material. And this piece is just heat responsive, so it's just leather treated with red, green and a blue ink compound, which will respond to heat. So when the flames have come down, you then get all these beautiful sort of peacock colours onto the piece. And the structure of the garment had to be integral, so it obviously had to protect its wearer. So it had to be hooded and finned over the head, so she didn't die. So this was the piece, so when it was black, and then when the flames had come down, you got these beautiful colours. But the real technology we were creating and showcasing at this point was this jacket here, which was a consultancy we were doing for Formula One at the time, and the brief was to track aerodynamics around a car in the wind tunnel in real time, so through a colour shift across the body of the car, which could let you know where on the car was where the ergonomics were well designed and where was more frictionless. And it was a really, really beautiful colour change and a colour shift, and it was just such a shame that no one got to see it on the car at that point. So when I launched the company, I wanted to think about that and think about how the person responds to their own environment and how they move around, and how does that look in a sort of unseen way. So this garment was created. The fins are all integral to the piece. So aerodynamics, when you're walking around, come straight across your shoulder, and then you get these sort of angel wings in an invisible particle sense behind your back that you would never see. And because this garment is finned, it picks up on those fluctuations. So the more you turn around and the more you move about your environment, the deeper the colours become. And the piece changes from black, red, green, and blue, depending on how much pressure is around the person as they move about their space. So I can show you this in real time on this video, and this was all just taken by us in our studio. It's not anything, there's no CGI on it, it's all sort of real time. And this is the jacket just responding very sort of gently to a breeze, so it's not too turbulent. But you can see where the fins start to pick up in the deeper areas. And this is it in a more uncontrolled environment. So this is a more shell-like structure. It's got a sister sculpture of this is in the other room, but this one, as the wind passes across it, you can see the gradient really shift across it because it's a straight sort of finish. So you can see that breeze as it goes across the surface. And then I think the control freak and scientist in my mind lived that it was unpredictable and it would do what it wanted, but at the same time I really wanted to create something that was more controlled. So I thought, okay, that's just tracking pressure levels. What if we put into the compound something that could track heat and something that could track UV and something that could track moisture within one recipe? Then we could start to build up a piece that could respond seasonally or also over a 24-hour period. So this piece responds seasonally, so depending on what atmosphere you put it in, whether it's spring, summer, winter, or autumn, you get different solid colours coming out. So you get the reds in the autumn, the greens in the spring, and then the blues throughout winter, and then it'll reset itself. We also did a 24-hour version of this, and forgive me, but I'm not sure which one's here. I need to check the records. It's either the 24-hour one or the seasonal one. And we did a collaboration with Liberty London, which is a department store in London with some drape lines, which all change their colours seasonally. So it's quite a nice execution of that. And then at the same time, all of these garments are just responding to the environment. And we were challenged by the Barbican in London to add something a little bit more unseen to the work that we were doing, if it wasn't unseen enough already. Which was this next piece. So we thought, okay, we've already tracked the Earth's environment, so how do we track space environment? So we worked alongside different sort of agencies in the space world and scraped their data off their weather satellites so that we could start to look at things like the aurora borealis, so the northern lights, the wind speed, solar flares, and solar eclipses. So this, we built a bespoke environment chamber similar to the one that's in the exhibition. And the weather elements within the environment chamber, so whether it's wind, whether it's magnetic influx of the aurora borealis, changes the environment in a live feed every 15 minutes to portray a live, direct visualization of what's happening in space at that time. So that piece is traveling, and then we also, so if it's the aurora, you get more of the solid shifts. If it's the wind, it reflects solar winds, and if it's solar flares, you get more of a punchy sort of thing happening. And this is a sort of live website which you can go on online. It's just the Unseen Ether, and you can see that happening in real time. It's traveling at the moment around the world for 5 years. And we also built in a secret sort of hidden Easter egg that every time there was a solar eclipse, the whole piece would go white. And then we very sort of forgot to tell people this. And then we got a very panicked phone call from Berlin saying, we think we've burnt your piece, it's gone white, but it was okay. It was because there was a solar eclipse, but it was just that nice sort of element of surprise, which was fun. At the same time, after we launched this collection, we were approached by Swarovski. And Swarovski at the time weren't a company that we were actually that interested in working with. We didn't think that their brand philosophies aligned with ours very well. However, when we uncovered more about the Swarovski gem division and what they were doing, which essentially was GM modifying and growing gemstones, we were A, horrified, and B, also very intrigued. So we were sort of like, okay, as young designers in this science design space, let's not be afraid of GM modification. Let's think about it in a new light and think, okay, right, we can grow gems. We have the capability of putting all of the raw materials into a crucible and fusing or growing a new gemstone. So why are we doing it just to look like every other gemstone and to behave like every other gemstone? So our idea and our philosophy was to look at this stone and try and build a gemstone from sort of molecule up that would have a more useful property than your average kind of gemstone, but that would also look beautiful. And this was the piece that was born from that. So it's a 4,000 spinel headpiece, which a lab-grown spinel, and we originally picked the spinel stone because it's a very good semiconductor, so it's used a lot in printed circuit boards. So it's in a lot of wearable technologies anyway, but just not as the spinel stone that you know it today. So we thought, okay, what if we can grow a stone and fuse a certain amount of conductivity into it that is better than your average sort of gemstone conductivity? And what if we did 4,000 of them and cloned them, so they're essentially 4,000 clones of each other? And then what if we created a compound that could track heat in 0.4 of a degree? Then we could build this up across the head, and because there's so many of them, depending on where is active in your brain, you get different patinations across the skull. Depending on where's active, it doesn't tell you what you're thinking, it just tells you where is active in the brain. And you get lots of different, no one's flatlined who's worn this yet, so that's good. But you get lots of different colour patinations from reds or green and blues in complete different areas of the brain, depending on, whether you're tired, whether you've been to the gym, whether you're hungover, whether you're, enthused, whether your eyes are shut, whether your eyes are open. It really is incredibly sensitive, which we weren't expecting. So we launched it as a concept. It was a conceptual piece to highlight the importance of the fact that these stones could do more than just look cool. And what was beautiful about that piece was that pretty much every neuroscientist on the record got in touch with us and said, can we work with you to create some sort of material that will help us understand more about our patients and look more into the brain. It's not as accurate as an MRI scan, it's never going to be, but it's some other tangible way of giving somebody something to understand more, which I think is a really great thing, to know more about what's happening in something that's so important to us. If you had a broken arm, you would go to the doctors, but if you have a broken brain, a lot of people don't really respond well to that. So that was a sort of, really interesting collaboration, but a great focus point for the company. And while this sort of just tells you where is active and not what you were thinking, at the same time we were working on a cleverer cousin of these collections, we always like to say, which was the Eighth Sense piece. So the Eighth Sense piece is the same family, so it's from the same collection. However, it doesn't respond to its environment, it responds to electrical signals. So we built a membrane of printed electronics throughout the ceramic sculpture, and essentially what we created was a textile which can respond and change its colours depending on digital data inputs. So that's anything from the time to the footsie to literally any, your health app on your iPhone, any Pantone reference, any sort of digital way of monitoring something that you can think of. We can tune that into our textile and assign colours to it so you can get these different colour changes. But as a concept piece, we wanted to look into understand more about the human, and those times when you're having conversations with people where sometimes you feel really drained and sometimes you feel really positive, and we were like, how is that, and why can you have connections with people and project this sort of magnetic field around yourself or not, and how do we track this kind of human connection. So we built our piece to respond to human EEG, so it reads your brain waves, and we do it in patient therapy sessions. So you come into the unseen and we sit you down and we let you wear this piece, and then it reads your brain and responds in colour to exactly what you're thinking at that time. So whether you're anxious, you get the reds, always happens first time. And then whether you're more chilled out, you get blues. If you're in a spiritual state or in a higher state, you get more whites. And then at the end of the session, we give you a sort of diagnostic readout of your brain, which we did at Fashion Week, which was really funny. Everyone just sort of, again, no one flatlined, but everyone got red, and then it would go into a more curious sort of meaning. And we did the CEO of Warner Brothers, who flew over from LA to do it, and she literally stayed for like 4 hours, and it was like playing all this music. And I mean, you can't chuck the CEO of Warner Brothers out, but it really was just like, for Christ's sake, I don't think you can go through any more colours. But it was really interesting, and what we've been doing is collecting that data to feed back to us. So it's all, you have to apply to do it, and it's all protected, but you have to, we're then using that to train our system, to train our app, which we built with a company called Holition, which are an augmented reality company. So we can use that data to make a sort of second generation of this, which is going to be much more accurate and much more able to feed back in a more instinctual way and quite a vibrant way, which we'll release at some point this year at some time. At the same time as doing this, we opened up our first shop in Somerset House. So everything we had created to date was very exhibition-led, and it was had a very high value to what we would, price point. You couldn't really, average person couldn't own a piece of it, which we thought was really sad. So we wanted to create products that people could own and have this sort of in their world, but we didn't want to necessarily say that we were a fashion brand or that we were a tech brand. We didn't really know what we were because we were only a year old. So we created a line of 7 products that highlighted what we could do. So it was things like changing colour with heat, we made candles, changing colour with aerodynamic, we made the feather, and then things like the sketchbook, which pressure and heat responsive, so just as you interact with them, you get the different colour shifts, which was great. And we showed this at the same time as doing the 8th Sense piece at Fashion Week. And then we had a department called Selfridges, which is in the UK, approach us and ask us whether we would be interested in partnering with them as their anchor brand for Christmas. And we were kind of like, yeah, okay, that's cool, but we're a startup, we have no money. So we managed to persuade them to give us all of our budget up front, which is the first time that's ever happened in the history of Selfridges. So we were all like, yay, before any collection existed. And that was really great. We had a window at Christmas, and we had a big display, and some of the pieces that were here were also in exhibition, and it was the sort of first time that we were able to really let people play with our technology and understand how it goes out into a real world. So we created a more wearable version of the wings piece. So this piece responds to the human itself, so it responds to its environment, changing colour, and also to your temperature range across your body. So depending on where you are and how you wear it, you get the different colour fluctuations coming across the surface. So it's never the same for like anyone who wears it. It always looks different. Same with the scarf. So this has got 6 formulas on it, and we tracked the data. So we worked with a company in Portsmouth who are the world's leading bio experts on collecting sort of infrared and spectrums of temperature gradients across the body. And we use that data to code our ink to then hand paint on the silk all the different areas. So depending on whether you wear it on the head or the shoulders, around wherever you wear it in different areas, you get different colours come out. So that was a sort of quite a complex recipe, but this recipe is even more complex because we obviously thought, okay, cool, so we're based in London, but what if people buy our products when they're in America, or what if they're in a different country? So we had to create a backpack or a piece or a leather or a material which we put into a backpack that could respond to many, many different things. So this will respond country specific, so it'll change its colours in different countries. It'll change its colours with wind across it, if you're in the shade, if you're in the summer or the winter. It literally just does its own thing. You can't really control it, but it gives you beautiful colour changes wherever you are. Whereas this next piece is a very controlled, specific recipe. So this is an alligator shoulder bag, and everything's made in the UK. We have it all handmade inside the UK, and it changes seasonally, again, like the the beetle's shell piece. So it changes reds in the autumn, blues in the winter, and then greens in the spring. And then the clutch bag is much more touch responsive and interactive responsive. Whereas the wrist straps, so these are all iguana skins, which change the longer you're wearing them. So essentially they're like a modern day mood ring, shall we say, even though I hate that analogy. But essentially the longer you have them on, the more they track your body and change color. And then when you take them off at night, they reset themselves back to black. Same with the wallet. So that was sort of literally a little snapshot into what we launched just gone at Christmas, and then we just, I think we're stocking here, and then we're stocking it up in New York too. And sadly, I can't put in our next piece, which was supposed to launch this fashion week. That was in collaboration with a very well-known space brand, which didn't launch its thing, so we couldn't launch ours. But that will come out in the next couple of weeks, and it's a really interesting project in that we've been looking. If you were to go to space, what would you want to bring back, and how would you want to remember that discovery journey? Probably said too much, but yeah, that will come out soon. And and then everything I showed you was all of our air collection, so it's all the collection that responds purely to the environment and changes its colour to air as such, different stuff within the air. We'll move in September into a water phase, which isn't going to be just water responsive surfaces, but looking at energy flows and how we transcribe energy and use water as a fluid as that connector between energy. So that's me in a quick nutshell. I guess if anyone's got any questions, throw them at me.
There's a mic coming on the other side.
Sorry. Your hand is down that way.
Well, first of all, wow, that was pretty amazing.
Thank you.
I was just curious, do the materials over time, will they lessen their efficacy, or is it pretty consistent?
Yeah, so that's like a really interesting point. So we, when we did the Selfridges collection, and then we're working with a couple of global brands on projects as well, which haven't come out yet, we couldn't put this stuff out into the industry if it didn't pass UK, EU, and US textile standards. So we had a very good 6 months of putting it through rigorous tests, and it passed in the end. But we talk about it as a sort of barber jacket. So if you look after it, it'll last you a lifetime, and you can pass it down to your children and what have you. One big thing is we have no idea what the environment's going to be like in 10 years. So yes, they will change. Will they be the same colours? Not sure, because we have the same environment? Not sure. But if you look after it and the environment stays exactly as it is today, then it will last you a lifetime. If you don't, you can always come back for a re-wax, we say. But yeah, I think what's beautiful and what's important to me is not to create fads, and it's to create something that lasts and almost create heirlooms. And I think by giving these a sort of environmental trigger or something that it responds to that isn't just the human, you have an intrigue and a more want to see how that piece will get passed down and respond to future environments. So yeah, I'd hope that they go on.
Mic on the other side.
Will Swarovski be actually manufacturing the crystals that you design so a normal person can buy them?
Maybe not Swarovski. Swarovski's in a very interesting company, but we own the IP rights to it and the patents to it, so it's up to us. Maybe.
My vote would be you would do it.
Yeah. So would mine. If I suddenly win the lottery, I'll be, yeah.
Johnny, you have the front row.
It's like if you were happy, the color will be bright, or if you're sad or upset, the color will be changing on the
Yeah,
piece.
so we assigned our colours to the chakras. So we looked into how sort of the vibrations of chakras and the colours that chakras respond. That's how we coded our textiles. So if you were happy, you got yellows and oranges. If you weren't, you got more like the darker end of the spectrum. And if you were into a sort of more spiritual, chilled out area, you got the whites and the purples. But you can code them to anything you want. That was just a sort of concept that we wanted to make it more easily understandable rather than coming out with a whole new traffic light system as such.
That's very impressive. And I also want to know, did you put any sensors in the fabric?
No,
or-
it's all organic matter, so it's all chemistry.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you.
Hello, I'm curious to know what, for example, the handbag, what does it cost?
I don't know. I think it's like 265.
That's
It's
it?
in the gift shop. Like, I honestly, I'm really bad, but it's online, so.
I'm shocked. A Coach bag costs more than that. Well, about
Yeah.
that same price.
But our sketchbooks, they're like £35, so that's like the cheapest thing. But something like the wings piece, they're valued sort of, over the
As
15,000
art
mark.
pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I was looking for something practical. That handbag is practical.
Yeah, come and see me after the show.
So I'm a mom of a very young, aspiring designer.
Okay.
What advice can you give perhaps these young men and women, right,
Yeah.
young people, about the track to go into perhaps this amazing design?
It's really hard. You don't have a life, but it's really rewarding. No, it's. I think the biggest lesson I've learned is to always stay true to what you believe in, even if it doesn't exist yet. Because when I was studying sort of chemistry originally, there was almost, when I took my GCSEs, which is what we have at sort of 16 years old in London, in England, you weren't allowed to do science and design. Like, to go into an A-level and do textiles and do chemistry was sort of, no, you can't do that because it's too much time. I think it's amazing now that the education system is changing to allow people to have both worlds. But I was really adamant that I was going to do both, and I didn't sort of give up. And yeah, it meant that I had to work a lot harder, and might not have had the CV that other people had. And applying to the Royal College of Art without a piece of textiles in my folder, I just chanced it. And luckily, I think I stood in what I believed. And I think if you believe in something enough and you have the data and the facts to prove that it will work or that it's needed, then anyone will listen to you. And then it's just a case of knocking down the right doors. So I'd say just be really brave and do that.
What did you want to be when you were a child?
I don't know. I wanted to be an astronaut. Then I decided I didn't like flying, and I wanted to be a vet. But then my hamster bit me, and I didn't like animals anymore. But I think I always wanted to do something. I think I wanted to do exactly what I'm doing now. I just didn't know what that was, because I've sort of carved my own thing. So yeah. What do you want to be?
I'm not sure
No?
yet.
This may be more physics than chemistry, but with all the unseen that you're tapping into and making us aware of, have you considered the possibility of the unseen gravity and using that in your art?
Yeah, I had a really amazing conversation with an astrophysicist called Roberto Trotta, who works a lot on sort of dark matter and what is the shape of the universe and stuff like that. So that's something that really intrigues me, because it's something that I can't get my head around, but he really likes what we do, because it's the first time you can see things that you couldn't see without using equipment, and it generally comes out differently than you'd expect. So, heat gradient, you can predict it and predict it, how it'll look on a surface in a computer model, but till you actually see that, you don't know it's going to behave in the way that you predict it's going to behave. So I'm really interested in working alongside scientists and academics, and part of our structure within our company is that we do go into lectures that blag our way into sort of crazy, astrophysics lectures that we probably shouldn't be at, but it's about, I don't know, we have a way to visualize stuff through a set recipe almost, and set amount of data, and that data goes across so much that I infuse other people to come and play with it and understand it from their world, because, I guess you'll have a complete different take onto what I would have. So I don't know if that answers the question, but...
I think your colors are absolutely beautiful, but
Thank
I'm
you.
wondering, in the future, can you foresee of a situation, say a courtroom with a jury or a high-stakes card game, where it would be a little bit telling for people to wear their colors?
Yeah, but there's always the choice to not wear it. I think that's the main argument there. But yeah, and I think there's obviously a lot of money around doing things for the military in those types of areas, but it's not really where my belief stands. So I don't believe that technology should be in everything in the world. I think it should be in specific things and there when you want it. It shouldn't be there just all the time. It sort of should be there when you need it and want it, and that's it, really.
Could you say something about your company, how it's structured, who works there, the kinds of people you employ, how you work on a project?
Yep. So we're 2 years old. We were founded in London, and then I literally brought together the people that I'd met in the industry that didn't really fit the system. So the first natural port of call was to go to close friends that trusted me into giving their jobs up to do something a bit nuts. So that was just me, myself, Krista and Jess. And Krista's background was in sculpture and more, she used to work for a company called Pretty Green, which is owned by Paul Smith. So in much more production-led buying, manufacturing type area. And Jess, who had studied with me at the Royal College of Art and did menswear. So although we released an accessory collection, not one of us is trained in accessories, which is a bit fun. But then things started to grow, and we brought on some of the people that were in more art direction, so to help with the events. We then brought on another chemist because my time was getting sort of taken up in running the business. It then we again brought on a coder, so an electronics sort of engineer. We then brought on another pattern cutter. And then the more things have sort of grown, we bring people on project specific. So depending on what project we're working on, we bring that skill set in-house. And then we'll either do that through a consultancy, or then we'll take them on as full-time role if the project's sort of over 2 years or 3-year project or something. And then just recently, we're just about to employ a CEO. So we've not had a CEO for 2 years. We've had help, and we've had sort of CEO help, but it's very much been do and learn and then repeat. So we're bringing a CEO in, and we've just moved premises to a new studio where we've now got our own lab, because a lot of the projects we're working on they won't come out for sort of 2-3 years, but they're incredibly highly secret, so we couldn't do it in public realms anymore. We got funding, we got some seed funding last year from private equity, venture capitalist fund. And then, it's sort of growing steadily but quickly. I think that's the sort of structure. But as I think the biggest learning curve I've had is not to employ someone if they've got a CV, is to employ someone if they're good at lots of things. Because we're such a small team. If you're really good at one thing, but you can't, or you don't want to dabble in, if you're really good at coding, but you don't want to have a crack at Photoshop, or you don't want to cut some fins out if they need cutting out, then it's not going to work, because everyone literally has to work on everything. But I think the concepts, they come out through research, but thinking about what we want to do always comes out from social meetings, which is another thing I would recommend any sort of young person to do, is that your business doesn't always have to be in front of a desk. Like a lot of my people that I met and projects have come about from going out and meeting people. It's not come from sitting behind a desk. So we have quite a flexible team that's good at many things.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you.
Cool.
Have a great day.